Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Let's talk, finally, my top 10 of 2020. Now, I'm going to do this list a little bit differently because I think it's really hard to always prioritize one game over another. Now, clearly, you like some games more than others, you dislike some games more than others. But when it comes down to it, oftentimes I find myself saying, and I'm sure you've been in the same boat, what do you want to play? Well, I'd be fine with this, or this. And that's what I feel like sometimes a top 10 list makes it very hard to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 10 through 6 that are going to be in order. And then the top 5 are really going to be, splitting hairs. There may be one slightly higher ranked than others. 2020, by all accounts, I think was a really good year. It was a really good year for me, at least. I see every year there's usually a geek list or a thread on Reddit that says, "Oh, this year was awful." And it's just humorous each year about, every year it pops up that this was the worst year in a long time. But personally speaking, because I have somehow finally found what I like and what I don't like, I'm getting less things that do not click with myself and the people I play with. So from that side of things, it has been a very good year. And frankly speaking, I think we're starting to see, I know it's been talked about in the past, especially from Shut Up and Sit Down, the golden age of board games, but I think we're really getting into it now more so. Because I think we're seeing a lot more ingenuity as of late. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with things that are done really well, even though they've been done before. But me personally, I love to see innovation. So that plays a role as well in my top games. So number 11, I'm going to sneak one in here. This is only on the list because I couldn't tell looking this up. I didn't play it until 2020, but it looks like the distribution sort of fell at the end of 2019, so I'm going to include it as sort of an honorable mention, and that is Mandala. Now, if you're not familiar with Mandala, it's a great two-player game. It's probably one of my favorite two-player games that is not a pure abstract type game. It has taken the place of Seven Wonders Duel and games of that ilk at my table. So what is a mandala? A mandala is a geometric pattern trying to express or conceptualize a tiny microcosm of the universe or part of the cosmos. Does it play into this game? A little bit, not really. But what you're essentially doing is you're taking two mandalas, two patterns on the board, and you are utilizing one or the other to the best of your ability. Where you have 7 colors, and what's interesting about this is you are limited at times of what you can play because you cannot duplicate a color on a mandala. There are 3 rows contained within the mandala. And so one is on your opponent's side, one is on your side, and one is the center. The center is the community one that anyone can play on. The outer edges on your personal sides is a side that only you can play on. So if you play a red on your side, a red cannot go anywhere in the other 2 lines of the mandala. And then you have 1 and 2 in front of you. So you'll have 7 colors and then 7 colors. Why is it making this list? It's clever. It allows you to be clever. Because sometimes you want to finish the mandala before your opponent can score more cards. And other times you want to drag it out so you can build cards up so that when it finally finishes, you get more points. The scoring system is also quite clever. As you collect colors of cards for a first time, they go in front of you, meaning the first card you get is going to be worth 1 point for that color. Then the second type or color of card you get is worth 2, and so on and so forth. And I'm sorry, let me clarify that. 6 colors and 7 in my head for some reason. But what happens then is you are trying to get all of the colors, but you're also trying to get more of the higher valued colors. And your opponent can see it. It's open information in that regard. It plays quickly. It sets up quickly. It's beautiful. There's a very nice linen mat that comes with it, which is super impressive. The biggest criticism I have for it, and this is a minor one, is that the cards are all square. So shuffling them is a real pain. Apart from that, it's an absolutely great game. And if you're looking for something for a 2-player, spouse, significant other, just quick to get out at, the shop or at work, this is a great game that fills that niche. Okay, let's go on to the list now. Number 10. Number 10 is Kingdom Rush, the recently fulfilled Kickstarter from Lucky Duck Games. Why is it making this list? Because it, again, does something I have not ever seen before. And I would argue that already it is a more successful IP or video game crossover into the board game world than many other games before it. It takes that tower defense that has not really been replicated very well up until this point in the board game world and does a more than adequate job. You could dare say it does a very good job of implementing that system, which has been very hard to do so far, onto the tabletop scene. It also is deceptively hard. Deceptively. There is a strategy, and the first couple times you play it, you're going to be knocked for a loop when you get to that first or second portal tile. The interesting thing and the spin on it, and because I think the concern on the video game is you just build up your towers, build up your towers, build up your towers, and then you can finally weather whatever's there. Now on the board game, it modifies that because otherwise that would be too easy with the board game, because what you're doing is your towers cover up pieces on the tiles as they pass by. And so they all have ranges and they all have different colors and different ways that they fire in different directions. So it's intuitive in that sense. Now the twist on it, the interesting twist here and how they mitigate you from being overpowered as the rounds go by, is that when you are firing a portal tile, these portal tiles that, are basically the things that will cause you to instantly lose if it reaches the end of the path, is that whatever tower you use to attack a portal, whether it's a level 2 or a level 3 or level 4, that tower is then lost. So you have to choose very carefully. Also, you have to make sure that you do not spend too much time just upgrading too few of towers, so that after you destroy the portal tile, you do not have enough towers to take out the other things that are in the wave of minions. It is very clever. It is very unique, as I mentioned. The biggest criticism I have with it is playing a 4-player game, or even a 3-player game. I think it is best suited for probably 1, 2, or 3 players. 4 players, there is too much downtime, there is too much discussion, because it really can be multi-handed more than many other games in the cooperative nature of which I am used to. And I don't say that as a negative, I just say that as an FYI. We just found ourselves saying, okay, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. There wasn't necessarily as much individualism as you may want, and it definitely makes itself more prone to quarterbacking if your group plays like that. So that would be the one warning I would have with that. Now, Lucky Duck Games did a great job with this game, though. I think this is a very standout quality game. I'm happy to have it in my collection. I think the the production was great. Not that that really influences things too much, but it's very solid from those things as well. So all in all, happy to get my copy on Kickstarter after, definitely worrying about things on Kickstarter in the past when I was backing, not knowing whether I was going to like things. I think this one's going to be a hit. It's a very select crowd. If you are a solo player, you should be looking at this if this fancies you at all, because it is a perfect type of game for solo players looking for something new and different. Okay, number 10, Kingdom Rush. So number 9 is going to be one that's probably not on anyone else's list, or very few, but I think it's worth mentioning, especially because of the way it came out getting made. So number 9 is Adventure Mart. You've probably never heard of it. Why is that? Well, because it was actually a failed crowdfunding game. Then it sort of left in limbo, and it actually ended getting picked up by Hub Games and produced that way. And that is relatively rare nowadays, is a failed Kickstarter crowdfunding game getting picked up. I mean, you see plenty of games go to retail that skip crowdfunding. You see plenty of crowdfunding games that go to retail and have retail versions, or even web shop versions, but you do not see this path. And why? It's because this game is actually really good. Don't let the art on this box fool you. This cutesy art is actually deceptively hiding a very cutthroat, run your own store business, selling to adventurers type game. A la sort of Bargain Quest, if you will. But I would argue it's much better than Bargain Quest. It's deck building, but with an auctioning twist. You are fighting for customers to buy your wares. And what you're doing in the game is you're upgrading your store, you're upgrading your employees, you're upgrading your wares, and you're upgrading the fixtures within the store to all give you different types of bonuses, different ways to attract customers, different bonuses for the things that you sell to the customers in the first place. And like I mentioned, you are bidding, auctioning on the customers themselves in the first place. How does this game differentiate itself? It differentiates itself, one, with that auction mechanism that I just mentioned, and then two, again, unlike a lot of traditional deck builders where you're just buying and throwing it in the discard pile, you have immediate use of what you're buying. And let me be clear, as I mentioned earlier, this is not a potentially very nice, very multiplayer but little interaction game. There are many abilities that have Take That. And so already, I'll say right now, if you do not like Take That, you will probably not like this game. There is some luck involved, but the rounds themselves are relatively quick. The abilities are all out on display for people to see as all the cards in the market are face up and static during the rounds, but then they change after every round completely. There is some blind bidding to the auction because you're never quite sure which customer you're going to do as they all come face down. And so the question then is, what are you going to do with your market or your mart in that sense? Are you going to focus on one type of customer and hope that you can get that one, or if that one gets revealed, you can go all in on that to maximize the points? Or are you going to try to appeal to the masses and have a little bit of everything so you can be a little bit of a jack of all trades? Those are the interesting decisions and dilemmas that this game provides. There's more terminology than I would necessarily like in a game like this, as each game now it feels like it has to come up with its own terminology apart from other games that have already come out. But apart from that, apart from some rulebook issues, this is a very fantastic game, especially if you like another twist on deck building. So check it out. That's Adventure Mart. Number 8. Number 8 needs little introduction, and that is the King of Tokyo. If you've been around long enough, you are aware of the King of Tokyo, and you already have your own opinion on it. Now, what Yellow did was they put out a new edition. When this was announced, it really split the crowd, I think, into one of two views. It either said, okay, what do I do with the old one? Or is this just a simple reskin to try and sell money of a new edition? Because there was already sort of a second edition that came out that gave a different character in the core set. And so people were wondering, what is going to make this edition so different? So King of Tokyo Dark. And is it going to be better? Should I even bother with it if I already have the King of Tokyo original? And the answer is, in short, yeah, you should. Now, that's not to say that I do not like the original King of Tokyo any less, but the truth of the matter is, at least in my opinion, to get the full experience of King of Tokyo, you really need the power-up expansion. Things do not fit well all in the base game without removing the insert with the power-up expansion, so it always means lugging around 2 games. The cleanup and the setup is a little more complicated, and it's just frankly a little annoying. Now, King of Tokyo Dark takes the power-up, mushes it together, but does it in a way that it sets it apart from its predecessor. Instead of each individual character having their own set of cards that they can at any point, depending on what they roll, get one of those cards randomly, they have now assigned values of corruption or points that you can earn based on your rolls, and you go up a track, and when you hit a certain amount of those, you get to choose one of the corruption abilities. To be clear, this is called the Wicked track, if you will. Does it reinvent the wheel of King of Tokyo? No. If you didn't like King of Tokyo to begin with, you're not going to like this game. This is probably not going to change your opinion. But if you're someone who likes the idea of King of Tokyo, or you like it in general, and you say, Chris, I'm going to buy one game, what is it going to be? I would say buy this instead of the other. Those powers that I mentioned, these powers each have 2 sides, and both sides have just insane abilities. Not insane in a bad way, but they all feel like in some way they are a little bit overpowered. And I like that because then the temptation to take one over the other is very hard to figure out. And then you can, again, customize your monster in a different way than just buying the cards from the market in the first place. Now, say what you will, they call it a limited edition. They definitely have done a component upgrade. The dice are absolutely beautiful, and the components are top-notch. But when you put out a limited edition of, I think they said 100,000 copies, okay, that's in 12 languages, but still, that's a lot of copies for a limited edition. So I don't necessarily think you need to have FOMO, but I wonder how long it will actually take for something like this to just not be available. Will it be a year? Will it be 2 years? Will it be 5? Will there be perpetually some stock? Or will it become more like Shadows over Camelot? I don't know. I didn't buy it for the FOMO, to be very clear. I bought it because King of Tokyo is one of my original gateway games that got me loving this community in the first place. So for me, it was an absolute no-brainer. If it was this good, it was just frosting on the cake, and it was. So that's why King of Tokyo is number 8. Number 7 has gone by many different names and is more of a remake with a few twists rather than a truly original game. Now, I say that just as a disclaimer, not as a negative. Number 7 is Iwari, which is also a sort of remake of Han or Web of Power in the past. All area control games. Why is Iwari on this list? Chris, you've already said plenty of times that you're not a big area control guy. You really don't like them. You're absolutely right. I'll be the first one to tell you that. However, this has definitely opened my eyes to the possibilities and the nuance of area control. I almost backed this on Kickstarter, but I had gone through my phase of selling Rising Sun and selling Blood Rage, and I said to myself exactly what I just said. You don't like area control. As beautiful and as solid as this looks, and knowing that the reviews are out there on Han so you can have an idea of what you're going to be getting in the first place, don't do it. So I didn't. And then I saw it getting delivered. And then I watched another gameplay video. And I bought somebody's copy on the second market of the deluxe edition. I think I actually got it for cheaper than they pledged for, especially including shipping. So that was also a plus. Saved a few bucks. Anyway, the biggest 2 criticisms I have for this game, get those out of the way. One is one of the totems is just not very well colored. That's been out there since the beginning. People have already talked about ways to repaint them and redo them. Okay. The second one is that I feel like some of the totem powers, the special totem powers, are a little bit overpowered. Because in the couple games we've played, it's been sort of, and this is maybe my lack of experience, a rush to get those, and they have been the biggest difference maker in the endgame scoring. Now, again, small sample size, but that was just the way I felt. Apart from that, this gameplay is deceptively cutthroat and deceptively making you feel like this game is going to be long, but turns out to be very short. I won't talk much about the actual gameplay. There are videos out there, obviously, that do a much better job of it. But there are only limited amount of spaces in this area control game of these certain lands. And they fill up very quickly. The scoring in this game is also not your typical majority area control type scoring either. Personally, I feel like, though, I'm going to have to play it a few more times to know how good and where it's truly going to fall in my list. Those issues that I mentioned of there's special conditions at the beginning of the game, and you get a totem that will amplify one of the ways that you score potentially, and there are 4 different ways that can happen. And so you can see that if in a 4-player game, one person gets 2 of those totems that cause a double or triple modifier of a certain way they score, it becomes very overpowered. And so I'm not sure if that's going to balance itself out, gameplay going forward, or if it is going to lead me to dislike the game, or even maybe consider removing that as part of the game to see how that affects things. Time will tell. I am happy that I have it. It will definitely hit the table. It definitely offers something different than the other 2 area control games that I have. And I think there's a lot of exploration and depth that can go into this game. It's just, again, as an area control game, am I going to be hyped up enough to beat some of my other preferred genres and mechanisms? Time will tell, but overall so far, that's why it's number 7. Now this is actually where it started to get really tough, I won't lie. I just re-looked at my list and I said, really? That's number 6? And, oh, well, wouldn't number 5, number 4, number 3. So we're probably splitting hairs even now, number 6. So number 6 is something that, again, I don't know why this hasn't been more on people's radar, but it's the Stygian Society. Now this is by Kevin Wilson of the TMNT fame, if you will. And it only raised a little over $100,000 on Kickstarter when it funded, and it was just delivered earlier this year. It's a 1 to 4 player, cooperative, diceless, vertical dungeon crawl. What do I mean by that? You have something akin to a dice tower, if you will. It is more of your cube tower, where on your turn, you're going to be choosing an ability that's going to allow you to choose certain colored cubes. The bad guys also get certain colored cubes on each person's turn as well. And what you do is you combine both of those cube sets, and then you drop them into this tower. Okay, Chris, but great, it's a dice tower. All the cubes fall out to the bottom. Why are you even talking about this? That sounds stupid. It's not stupid because they have designed this tower out of cardboard. But in your setup, because it comes unassembled, you have to set it up yourself, there are layers in the tower like Swiss cheese. So not all of these cubes are going to make it through each time you drop. Only some may. All of them may. Or it may knock ones from previous that were stuck in there. The other variant is that when they come out onto the ground or the floor, there is a little fenced-in area called the crypt. And if they land in there, any cube that does is now doubled in value. So instead of being worth 1, it is worth 2. That is true for the good guy cubes as well as the bad guy cubes. I've never seen it done before. And honestly, as ridiculous as it sounds, it's a lot of fun. And it really changes how you approach the game. The monsters that you fight are laying out in front of you. It's very straightforward in the actual gameplay. Choose an ability, grab your cubes, grab the bad guy cubes, drop the cubes, trigger the bad guy abilities, trigger your ability. It's very straightforward. What the monsters do sometimes depends on the little positioning that there is, which can also affect which actions you're going to take. There are 2 rows that the monsters can be in, the front rank and the back rank. So obviously you cannot melee the back rank. And there's ways to mitigate those cubes falling. Or there's ways to mitigate the bad guy's abilities. Because every time that reaches a certain number of cubes of the bad guys, something triggers. Either the ability triggers or the floor triggers. The floor triggering increases your peril. Well, if it's not clear by the name, peril is bad. The higher the peril, more bad things happen. You get to a certain peril, you lose. Take enough damage as a group, you lose. I've played this game 3 times now. 4. I've played this game 4 times now, and I've had widely different results in all of the games. To be clear, there have been several consistencies at the same time. 1, it's a lot of fun. 2, how your group is made up vastly will change what levels are difficult for you and what are not. The last game we played, the mini-boss almost wiped us via peril, but we cleaned the clock of the final wizard at the top of the tower. Absolutely cleaned the clock. Previously, breezed through the mid-boss, got almost wiped by the end-boss. So it's not the same thing. And the floors are completely different. You have a stack of floors that you choose from for the lower tiers as well as the higher tiers. The treasures could be trapped when you win. You level up and you have health as a group. So you're not having to nitpick in terms of, oh, your guy leveled up. Oh, wait, now it's my turn. Oh, now my guy leveled up. You do it collectively. There is some potential for alpha gaming, but there's really not, because each person has too much going on individually as you start to get to the higher upper levels of the tower to be able to know all of the other person's things, to be able to maximize what they're going to do as well as yourself. I mean, 2 of the times I have played, I have tried to solo this with 3 characters, and let me tell you, it's not an easy game to solo. Like, I would probably not recommend that you solo this game. Not because you can't, and not because it's bad that way, but because each character ends up with so much stuff that you're invariably missing powers, either passive or active or support, and you're just not going to get the full effect and the full game, and you're going to miss things that could potentially cost you the game, and nobody wants to do that. So in case you can't tell, I really, really like this game. The biggest criticism that I can think of offhand is that, frankly speaking, some of the powers of the individual heroes are a little bit too overpowered at times. There is the steel fisticuffs from the fighter, if you will, the knight, I forget the exact name. You can, if you kill an enemy, you just get to go and go and go again. And that's really powerful. We had 3 floors end that way with the character who played that one last time. He ended the floor like 3 or 4 out of the 6 times because he just kept killing things, which was great for us, but you can argue if you want to play or have an ability like that. Now, this game is also relatively hard. At the same time, I think it's relatively balanced because I have seen people on the Board Game Geek forums both saying, oh, it's way too hard. Oh, it's way too easy. So that tells me that it's probably about right. Now, what would I compare this to? I'd compare it to Spirit Island, actually. Bear with me for a second, because I know that that's going to be sort of a far-out comparison. It's a comparison in the sense that there is chaos. The bad guys have a lot of abilities that trigger often, but you also have a lot of ways to mitigate that in your favor, potentially. How you mitigate it often matters more than can you mitigate it. The other big criticism I'll say is the rulebook is not spectacular. The rulebook is missing a lot of clarifications and just small nuances that make the gameplay crystal clear from the get-go. And that's why I was really glad that I played it by myself so I could look things up and ask a few questions online and find some answers before having to play it with other people. It made it that much smoother because otherwise there were definitely some hiccups. And there was even a hiccup in the last game of trying to figure out something with the status effects. All in all, though, this is a game I am surprised has not gotten more acclaim. This is a really fun game. It takes a really unique twist on the dungeon crawl, and I've never seen cube dropping like this done this well. Or frankly speaking, done hardly at all in the first place. If this sounds of interest to you, you need to check it out. I am usually more of a completionist in terms of gameplay on the Kickstarter, which has come back to bite me more than a few times. But this is one game, having played just the base game, makes me eager, just like in Spirit Island, to open up the expansion to see the characters, the enemies, and the powers that can be integrated in, because I think it's that good, and the replayability might not be to Spirit Island in terms of the variability, but it's going to be fun for a very long time because of the amount of levels that you have, the enemies, and the character composition that your team chooses. So all in all, that's why it's number 6. And like I said, it was hard putting it number 6 anyway because of how much I actually like it now. So let's talk top 5. What made the top 5 then? Number 5, boom, Cosmic Frog. Got it from the publisher. Full disclaimer. It's a great game. Check out my review if you really want more in-depth thought. The TLDW is that this game takes mechanics that I have not seen before. It takes the craziness that you would expect by the box cover and makes it a highly enjoyable romp around the universe as immortal cosmic frogs trying to digest land in their gullet to score points based on an abstract stacking in their own separate universe. The powers are unique. The depth and the interaction is as much or as little as you want to make of it within each game. And it is a unique game unto any other that is going to be staying in my collection, period. Again, this is another game where I don't know why it hasn't gotten more acclaim. It is one of the most solid games I have played in a long time. where there are very little criticisms or faults. The components make for the price point to be more than your average game that's coming out at retail right now. But they are more than worth it. It has probably the best mat that I've ever seen in a retail game. The tiles are the thickest tiles I've ever seen in a retail game, cardboard-wise. So you are paying quality-wise in that sense. Again, that's not a reason that I would get the game in the first place, but I think we're always worried that when we buy a box, how much of that box is going to be air, and how much of that price point is actually going to be reflective of what you're getting in that box. And I can look you in the eye, virtually speaking, and say, with that box, you will have no worries about that you got your money's worth. And that, in and of itself, is one of the biggest endorsements of a game in general that I feel like you can give sometimes. All in all, that is why Cosmic Frog was my number 5 game this year. Number 4. I have a review coming out for this shortly. I'm going to talk about it much more in depth. But number 4 is Machina Arcana, the 2nd edition. As you know, I'm a big fan of dungeon crawlers. I don't get to play them very often. Kids, it's a whole nother issue. But this is a dungeon crawler unlike anything else I've ever played. This, again, takes your typical fantasy dungeon crawler trope and twists it and puts it on its head. When I was trying to describe this to my brother-in-law the other night, the best thing I could tell them is, you know how in dungeon crawlers, you're usually fighting, slogging, and then sort of sometimes moving away and running, whatever. This game is more about the tactical running away and how you do it, and fighting in this dungeon crawler is a last resort. There is a lot of strategy in that sense. If that appeals to you in any way, where the strategy of the dungeon crawler matters, and that you are fighting as in a steampunk horror Cthulhu-esque realm last, as it probably should be if you were actually in that realm, you need to check this game out. As I will mention numerous times in my review, this rulebook is not good. The explanations are not thorough enough. The terminology is not clear enough. The symbology is not clear enough. And the references to other pages are not done in a very succinct manner. That being said, there is a very strong community online that has put together information to make this much clearer. I have seen plenty of games with poor rulebooks that it is not often worth the effort to try and learn it, and it's easier to get rid of it than it is to keep it in your collection and hope that someday you will wistfully be able to get it to the table and magically have a way to do so in terms of understanding it. This game is well worth the effort that I put in to learn this game in the first place because it is that great and unique of an experience. The combinations of mechanics, the combinations of items and the way it uses the items and progresses through the campaign in the first place and forces you to choose how you're going to maneuver on the board is fantastic. I cannot understate that. I backed the expansion on Kickstarter when the 3rd edition came up, not having played the 2nd edition, going, well, I hope so. Well, it turns out I'm very happy I backed that now. And I'm very happy, and I think this is going to be a complete twist and different game than a lot of my other dungeon crawlers. And it is going to be staying in my collection for that reason. So that is why Machina Arcana, the Steampunk Cthulhu Dungeon Crawl, is number 4. Number 3. Number 3 was gifted to me on the Pay It Forward chain. And this is a game that I probably never would have bought on my own because I didn't really think it would be of ever any interest. Because, like I mentioned earlier with Area Control, the other thing I don't play a lot of is Euro. Euro and me are sort of like mostly oil and water. It just is that way. However, Glen 2 Chronicles has been probably one of the biggest surprises to me in terms of things I actually liked in a long time. Sequel to Glenmore, this was also a Kickstarter-funded game. This is a tile-laying, Euro-style worker placement Scottish board game. The game's only 4 rounds. You're each a Scottish clan trying to build up your castle in the surrounding highlands to get the most points via livestock and goods and resources that you can. Why do I like it? I love the rondel mechanism. I didn't even know what a rondel mechanism was before this game, hardly. And I just love the fact that on your turn, you get to choose whatever tile you want, but you move your character to where that tile is. And then everybody behind you gets to go before you get to go again. So if you're way at the back, you can play catch up in a sense. At the same time, this game, already aware that somebody could just linger back way on the rondel and get a whole bunch of tiles and get a whole bunch more points that way, already says at the end of the game, if you have the most tiles, you're going to lose points for how many more tiles you have than the least person. So they have very thoroughly thought out this game. This game reminds me in a way of El Grande. The base game alone is more than enough content that you should ever be happy with if you just left it there. At the same time, Chronicles adds these modules that you can incorporate as many or as little as you want. I have not played it enough to feel confident, just like with El Grande, to need to add any more of these modules. The worker placement feels less worker placement and more engine building at times, and the tile laying in combination with the rondel makes you feel clever when you can place your tiles in a very clever way to utilize the maximum amount of ability of those icons and the resource gathering or selling if you can. There is also a highly variable Scottish clan map that you are allowed to go and get variable powers or variable bonuses with on the side. So your options are not just what's on the rondel, there are various elements. And that's without even talking about any of those additional modules. Without a doubt, this is one of the best games I have played this year. This is not a super light game. It's not a short game. The setup is more than a lot of other games. But I can tell you that it is absolutely and utterly worth it. Now, I think the problem is it's sort of out of stock everywhere right now. And so you just might not be able to find it. That's the biggest conundrum. But is it worth it? As a non-Euro guy who also very much enjoys tile laying, yes. Yes, absolutely. If I'm looking for something a little heavier than, say, Isle of Skye, but still not Euro heavy in any sense, this is an absolutely great fit. And I have no qualms about endorsing it. Check it out. Glenmore 2 Chronicles, number 3 on the list. Now, number 2 and number 1, I'll tell you right now, if you've watched my channel at all, if you've watched my other videos, you already know what they are. You already know what they are because I've already done reviews on them. So I will give them their due because I think it's worth it, but I just want to give them another shout out. Number 2, Nidavellir, the Norse mythology bidding, auctioning, set collection game out of Europe. It is not currently over in the US market, and that is by far the biggest fault that I can give it. Because it is an absolutely unique blend of bidding, auctioning, set collection, balanced with new takes on those mechanisms, then I can really give due credit outside of my review that I put up previously. The ability to change the values that you're bidding with, not only to make yourself bid better later by having to bid 0 in the first place to do that, but then also to use those bidding values as endgame points is brilliant. The multiple factions that are all relatively very well balanced, even though all of them score differently in the set collections, is tremendous. The amount of time it must have taken to figure that out was, I can't imagine. As I said in my review, I am waiting for a more confirmed pre-order of the expansion for it, because when it is, and I'm debating that I might not even wait for the English copy because it is language independent, I can get the French copy and read the rules online in English that the company has posted. That's how much I like this game. And I may just even import it if I need to beforehand, because it is that good of a game, and it adds that much of a better layer of depth in terms of some of the artifacts that it's going to add and the elements it's going to add with the expansion. And so this game, like all of these in the top 5, are going to be easily staying in my collection. No doubts whatsoever. They are not leaving anytime soon, or if at all for that matter. The artwork is fantastic. The production is great. The mechanisms are unique and done in a way, again, I have not seen replicated elsewhere. It should be on your radar if you like this at all. If you want more information, check out my review. I'll put it in the link below. Going straight to number 1, let's not dilly-dally any longer. This video's longer than I thought it was going to be in the first place. The Loop by Catch Up Games. This is by far the best game in terms of enjoyment that I have had all year long. This game, this is a unique twist on the time-traveling-esque cooperative board game. It is hard, it is difficult, but it has the moments in it which we all crave from the game we play of aha, or making you just feel like you just pulled off the absolute boss move and you are the cleverest person in the room. It has provided more of those moments for me in the half dozen or so times I have played it than any other game, maybe ever for me. The name comes from your ability to use energy cubes that you place on the board to allow you to loop. Essentially, if you think Groundhog's Day, to do a same action over and over again. Meanwhile, if you don't like randomization, this is going to be the biggest critique of this game. Dropping cubes in the middle of the board into a tower that spits them out into one of 3 areas every single turn. And that area changes each round. It is a difficult game. I think of the 6 times we have played it, we have won once. And let me tell you, I have never been happier during a loss than during those games as well. So that right there also should tell you something. We lost on literally the last turn, the last drop, 1 cube, causing us to lose last time. And if we would have survived the cube drop, we would have automatically won. The tension was palpable. The excitement was there. I cannot give this game enough props. The biggest problem is they only printed like 100 copies in English. The rest is in French, and it is not language independent, unlike Nidavellir. So this one, if you do not read French, you are not going to be able to play. The theme is unique. The incorporation of that theme is not just pasted on. The components are top notch. There are 4 modes of the game. I have not even touched 3, and this is already making number 1 for me. Again, check out my full review as I also talk about how it actually plays if you want more details. But I cannot say enough good things about this that this will easily be staying in my collection forever because it is just that good. I hope at some point they make an expansion for this because I would instantly back that as well. So that, in a nutshell, is The Loop. So there you go. Obviously, my list is drastically different than anyone else's out there in terms of best of 2020. And I'm going to try also to put out a best played in 2020 as well. And the one thing I may try and do is a lot of these games I played for the first time would make that list. So I'm going to try and make the list a little bit different to say not games necessarily that came out in 2020, but I may give a couple of these games shout outs as well, just so I can talk about a few more other varied games that were of interest that I think should be of interest to you if you have any similar likes or just things that are worth talking about. So if that interests you at all, subscribe so that you can see when the next one comes out. Again, my goal, 2021 by 2021. Let's see if we can do it. As always, anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for putting up with me. Stay classy. See you around.